I move that we recognize the gentleman from the Lone District of Muntinlupa, the Honorable Ruffy Biazon, to avail of the privileged hour. So move, Mr. Speaker.
The Congressman from the Lone District of Muntinlupa, Representative Rosano Rufino Biazon, be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, by virtue of Republic Act number 10661, the month of November was declared as the National Children's Month to be commemorated every year in connection with the adoption of the Convention on the Rights of the Child by the United Nations General Assembly on the 20th of November, 1989. As envisioned by the collective wisdom of the members of the Philippine Congress, the passage of the law sought to instill in the consciousness of the Filipinos the value of protecting and upholding the rights of children, not only in consonance with the UN Convention, but as a duty to the country's offspring. As we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the historic adoption of the Convention in a couple of days, I request the indulgence of this House for me to express some thoughts on how we as an institution representing the people can uphold the rights of children. But before I proceed, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of member organizations of the Child Rights Network, CRN, the largest alliance of organizations and agencies pushing for children's rights legislation in the Philippines. CRN, in partnership with the House of Representatives Committee on the Welfare of Children, is currently hosting a week-long celebration here at the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago, various countries, including the Philippines, recognized that certain civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights are inherent and inalienable in every child, regardless of their ethnicity, gender, religion, skin color, and language. This resulted in the adoption of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. As a 5-term member of the Philippine Legislators Committee on Population and Development, or PLCPD, I, together with my fellow legislators, am committed to ensure that people are able to enjoy the benefits of their right to an improved quality of life. This applies particularly to children who, because of their status in life, are in the most need of the state's care and protection. As legislators, we are duty-bound to protect these children and their future, as well as to ensure that they are living in an environment conducive to growth and development. This is why I stand here today to speak about a very alarming issue that confronts our nation's children today: the relentless spread of tobacco use in the country. This perennial issue continues to pose a serious threat against the rights of every Filipino child, particularly their right to survival and development. Under the CRC, the survival rights of children focus on their right to life, health, and their basic needs. The Philippines is committed to ensure that every child realizes their right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health. Hence, it is the obligation of the state to prioritize the health of Filipino children and protect them from the predatory moves of businesses that seek profit at the expense of people's health, whether children are first or second-hand consumers of their products. On the other hand, the developmental rights of children pertain to their right to reach their fullest potential, aided by favorable policies, a conducive environment, and the removal of barriers that prevent them from reaching their full potential. This includes insulating children from factors that compromise their health and well-being by making those factors inaccessible, as well as informing and educating people about the ill effects to children's development. These key principles are in fact recognized by other treaties and conventions to which the Philippines is a signatory to. The World Health Organization framework on tobacco control, for example, reiterates the commitment of state parties to the CRC to recognize the right of the child to the enjoyment of highest attainable standard of health. No less than our Constitution also reminds us of our duty and obligation to protect and promote the health of our countrymen. It is our role as legislators to safeguard our nation's children from all the harms that would impede opportunities for full development. One of the things that threaten these rights is tobacco. The children are susceptible to non-communicable disease brought about by tobacco use, and even worse, death. The World Health Organization reported that 700 million, almost half of the world's children, breathe air corrupted by tobacco smoke. It should be stressed that non-smokers breathing in secondhand smoke actually capture the same nicotine and other chemicals gasped by smokers. This, without doubt, violates children's rights to a healthy and clean environment. Mr. Speaker, it is in this context that this representation would like to present information and studies on the burden of tobacco in the Philippines, especially among the youth. According to the 2015 Global Youth Tobacco Survey, 16% of the youth in the Philippines are currently using tobacco products. This means that as early as 10 years old, the lives of the future of this country are already in grave danger. This is a little higher compared to the 2011 data, where only 13.7% account for young tobacco users. The same survey shows that more than half, or 57.9% of the youth, are exposed to secondhand smoke in public places, while 38.3% of them are exposed to it at home. These are the children whose rights we vowed to protect 30 years ago in the ratification of the CRC. These are the young people whom our very Constitution recognizes as having an indispensable role in nation building. Mr. Speaker, let me turn everyone's attention to a very novel issue affecting the youth of today: the use of electronic nicotine delivery systems, or e-cigarettes as we commonly know it. This product was introduced by the tobacco industry as a cessation device and supposedly as a less harmful alternative to the conventional cigarette. However, it is becoming apparent that these devices are not a means to escape the ill effects of cigarette smoking, but rather just an alternative method of delivery, with nicotine infused into the liquid component, known as juice, of the devices, or even tobacco leaves themselves in certain variants. Certainly, the habit of or addiction of taking a puff and inhaling substances into the lungs are not eliminated. More and more studies have also shown that this product is actually a gateway to smoking addiction. In addition to this, there is an increasing recognition among health experts and policymakers worldwide that these products have adverse effects on its users and non-users alike. This can be seen from the banning of or regulation of the use, sale, and distribution of e-cigarettes in more than 40 countries around the world, including Brazil, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, Mexico, Indonesia, and Argentina, among others. In this regard, there is a compelling logic for the Philippines to regulate the same, especially if we think that what is at stake here are the lives of children who are exposed to this apparent health hazard. Studies have also shown that the nicotine detrimentally affects the brain development of children as well as young adults and impairs their cognition. In the United States, the Center for Disease Control describes the situation as, and I quote, an outbreak of lung injury associated with the use of e-cigarette or vaping products, due to the high number of deaths and illnesses across different states related to the use of the devices. A term has even been coined to refer to the negative effect: EVALI, or e-cigarette or vape-associated lung injury. According to the CDC, as of November 13, 2019, 2,172 cases of EVALI have been reported to the CDC from 49 states in the U.S., including the District of Columbia and the 2 U.S. territories, Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. Alaska is the only exception. 42 deaths associated with EVALI have been confirmed by the CDC as well, with more deaths under investigation. Mr. Speaker, right here at home, just 2 days ago, the first case of EVALI has been recorded by the Department of Health. A 16-year-old girl who has just started vaping March of this year fell ill with symptoms associated with EVALI. The girl, who is already a cigarette smoker before she used the vapes, is non-asthmatic with no report of drug abuse. Let me also remind everyone of the case of a 17-year-old Filipino who suffered severe burns in his face when the battery of his e-cigarette exploded. Unfortunately, this is not the only time that this has happened. Another 17-year-old boy in the United States had a similar experience that resulted to complete shattering of his jaws. Are we to wait for another similar incident for us to take positive actions to regulate this product? Finally, it is clear that the marketing strategy in promoting e-cigarettes and vapes spare the youth. Promotion that centers around vapes being harmless, coupled with flavors such as candy and popular drinks, make it attractive to children. With social media as a platform for the promotion and trade of these products, the children are vulnerable to the enticement of e-cigarette vape use. Media has been the biggest platform of the tobacco industries by spending $9.4 billion per annum to market their products in the well-being of Filipinos. Fourth, strictly regulate the use of e-cigarettes. Being an unregulated product, e-cigarettes can be easily accessed and bought by everyone, including minors. This is a matter of great concern since, as mentioned earlier, flavors that are attractive to children are being used to market these products. That is why it is important that we impose a ban on all flavors, or at the minimum, on flavors that are attractive to children. Finally, heed the people's call for stronger policies. Based on a Pulse Asia survey in January 2019, an overwhelming number of Filipinos, smokers and non-smokers alike, agree that smoking in public places should be prohibited and that the minimum age for buying and using cigarettes should be raised. To end, we, together with our allies, must strive to protect the health and environment of every child. The theme for this year's National Children's Month is Children at the Heart of the Law, pressing on after 30 years. It has been 30 years since the CRC was adopted, and yet there is so much more to do to ensure that Filipino children are able to fully and meaningfully exercise their rights. As a policymaker, I believe that it is our primordial duty to ensure that children's rights and the well-being of these children are at the heart of the law and in every policy that we make. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we recognize the Honorable Mike Defensor of Anak Kalusugan Party List for his interpellation. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mike Defensor is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with the Honorable Privileged Speaker, the Honorable Biazon, yield to some questions. Mr. Speaker, may the Honorable Privileged Speaker yield to some questions, Mr. Speaker.
Gladly, to my distinguished colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first let me at the onset congratulate the Honorable Biazon for the speech that he gave. It is really very timely that we come up with a policy as regards e-cigarettes, and he not burn technology, as this is fast growing all around the world. Mr. Speaker, I understand that in many countries there are already regulations in place, in particular in the United States and the United Kingdom. My first question, Mr. Speaker, as regards this concern, is if there is a comprehensive data in the Philippines as regards smoking in relation to e-cigarettes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health is at the beginning of gathering the information with regard to the details on the incidence of the use of vapes, this being a relatively new technology and product that has been introduced into the Philippine market. And as I pointed out earlier, the first case of an illness that is possibly related to the vapes has just been recently reported. If we base our information on the experience of other countries, in the United States, as much as 42 deaths have been identified as being related to the use of these devices. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I asked this question because I myself was a smoker of regular cigarettes and has recently transitioned to e-cigarettes. Now, Mr. Speaker, I understand that in the case of the United States, only in the United States, in fact, Mr. Speaker, do they have cases of deaths related to lung diseases. 1 out of 5 of the high school students that were recorded to have been positively using e-cigarettes were in fact infected or were afflicted with lung diseases, not because of e-cigarettes per se, but because of the use of THC. THC, Mr. Speaker, being a byproduct of cannabis, which are in fact unregulated products in the United States, illegal, to be blunt about it, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, the data coming from the US is not exactly representative of what is happening, of which many regular smokers are transitioning to e-smokers, meaning the cause of the burn and the tar, which have been established as the ones causing lung diseases, are not present in any other country, but only in the United States, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the fact that ends or vaping devices in the Philippines are not regulated. We have no knowledge of the contents of the juice that are being sold in the market. That is the very reason why there is that urgent need for regulation. Because by the very nature of vapes, wherein a person ingests a foreign substance, there is already a possibility, just by a layman's view, there is already a possibility that it could be not just a direct cause of illness, it could be a carrier of whatever cause that could lead to illness. And the FDA itself has of the view, as stated in many hearings here in the House, that this is a matter of concern. And that is why there is this move to have at least the FDA regulate it so that we will know the exact contents of these juice that are being sold in the market. And based on information coming from those in the industry themselves, they are in fact calling for a regulation. Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I agree with the statement of the Honorable Biazon as regards regulating the product. Because I understand, Mr. Speaker, as of this morning, the Department of Health was calling for a total ban. To be fair with the Department of Health, they were calling for a total ban of e-cigarettes and tobacco in general. But, Mr. Speaker, I do not take that position because what will happen is really just a case of the scenario of the prohibition in the United States where alcohol was banned, but you see a lot of unregulated alcohol going around the market, and in fact being sold and being bought by the public without the regulation of government. That's number one. Number two, by doing so, we do away with the taxes that we have been getting from the sin taxes imposed on cigarettes and other cigarette products. So I agree, Mr. Speaker, with the statement of the Honorable Privileged Speaker that it should be regulated. I think, Mr. Speaker, that the UK scenario would be a good model because in that in the United Kingdom, they address the issue as a harm reduction issue instead of an e-cigarette or an e-vaping standalone issue, which means, Mr. Speaker, that they would like their smokers of regular cigarettes, instead of continuing to smoke regular cigarettes, to transition to regulated, reputable, and acceptable e-cigarettes in the market, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this representation is in agreement as well that regulation is the way to go. Although we do recognize the Department of Health's position, because after all, they are the guardians of health of the Filipinos. And they would like to see an environment where we are totally free from any possible causes of illness. So regulation is the way to go as of this moment, Mr. Chairman, and that is what we are calling for. Just to ensure that these products pass through sufficient scrutiny as to ensure the health of the Filipino people, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I join the Honorable Privileged Speaker, the Honorable Biazon, again in his advocacy to have this regulated. I would like to know more, to get the data, not only from the health perspective, from the smoking industry perspective, but basically, Mr. Speaker, the experiences of other countries as regards e-cigarettes and e-vaping. I would like to be part of the investigation on this. Of course, the regulatory body, Mr. Speaker, in the US is the Bureau of Tobacco Control, different from the Philippines where we only have the FDA, but that is what we have as of now, and we have to act as fast as we can. Inasmuch, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to ask some more questions to the Privileged Speaker, I am already satisfied with his responses. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I am distracted by the beauty of the Honorable Lucy Torres, who is in front of me while I'm asking the Honorable Privileged Speaker. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Biazon.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we refer the speech of the Honorable Biazon to the Committee on Rules for its appropriate action.
Is there any objection? The Chair hears none. The privileged speech of Honorable Ruffy Biazon is hereby referred to the Committee on Rules.